With U.S. tariffs now imposed on much of the world, here in Canada, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is ramping up his criticism of the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, for not securing a new trade deal.
Now, Mark Carney promised that he would handle Donald Trump. That's a quote. He said that he would negotiate a win with Donald Trump. He said that the deal would be done by July the 21st, and then he said it would be done by August the 1st. Those promises were not kept. The tariffs have actually doubled since Mark Carney became Prime Minister, promising that he would get results.
Instead, Poilievre is proposing his own plan to spur the Canadian economy in the face of tariffs. He says his Canada Sovereignty Act would speed things up so that 2 pipeline projects, an LNG project, and a road to Ontario's Ring of Fire would be under construction by next March. For more on the plan, we've reached Shelby Kramp-Neuman. She is the Conservative She is the Conservative critic for Canada-U.S. trade. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to start about this announcement today from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Tell us how this would work.
Thank you, Katie. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Look, this has been an extraordinarily tricky several weeks, months that we've been trying to manage. And Canadians in general are nervous, they're frustrated, they're concerned, and we don't know what's happening because the goalpost keeps getting moved forward and forward. Look, first we had a conversation at the G7 that we were going to have a deal by July 16th. And then that moved forward to July 21st, and then that moved forward to August 1st. So the goalpost keeps moving. So with the announcement today, we're saying Canadians need to get back to work. Canadians need to have a sense of where we're going. Canadians need some hope that we can move forward.
So how exactly would that break down? So that's your goal, is to get things moving. How would the Conservatives make this happen? How do you want to see it take place?
For sure. Well, after basically a decade of Liberal failures, I'll be quite candid respectfully, our industries have been crippled. We've got anti-developmental laws, emission caps, industrial carbon tax. There's a host of different policies that need to be reversed to get boots in the ground and Canadians back to work.
So I understand your criticism of the Liberal government, but how exactly would this Conservative plan work?
Well, look, Katie, with all due respect, respectfully, this conversation that has been happening over the last several months has been lacking. I have made several efforts, as have all Conservatives, to move the needle on this. Mark Carney promised that he would handle this during the election. He promised that he would negotiate a win. This is not happening. So how we can move forward with this, we need to resume the House. We did try to get the conversation back with the International Trade Committee. That hasn't happened. So we're just trying to show Canadians that there are solutions to this on the domestic side. We can't always handle what's happening south of the border, so we have to look at how we can do things in-house to get jobs, people on the jobs, boots on the ground, and shovels in the ground.
I understand. We're going to get to the criticism in a moment, and I'm going to ask you for how you would like to see Mark Carney act differently. But for Canadians who are watching this, who may not have seen Pierre Poilievre's announcement today, I'm trying to understand what this plan outlines, and I'm not getting a sense of that from you.
No, I can happily provide that. I'll be quite specific. Bill C-69, which has made it impossible to build pipelines. We need to basically, there's a series of growth blocking laws that we need to repeal. Bill C-48, which banned oil tankers on the West Coast. The industrial carbon tax, which raises costs on everything for Canadians. The oil and gas cap, that's killing jobs. The EV sales mandate that will increase the price of gas-powered vehicles, the plastic bans, the censorship laws. There's a host of policies that need to be reversed, and it's a all in one, and it's a vision for Canadians as opposition, because we can't just be, parliamentarians often look at the short game, and we really have to look at the long game and how we can best benefit all Canadians.
Okay, so there's been some disagreement among Canada's premiers about the best path forward. We're hearing from Ontario Premier Doug Ford saying that Canada should retaliate harder, that tariffs should be increased against American goods. Other premiers are saying no, perhaps it's time to scale that back. Which direction do you think the federal government should go in this moment in order to deal with Donald Trump?
Bottom line, Katie, I would suggest that we all need to be at the negotiating table. Right now, the government is I respect, it's a game of strategic chess. And right now, I'm not sure if there's anyone at the other end, at the other side of the table that's playing games. So we have to look at concessions. We don't know what concessions are being made at what cost. And Canadians, we have such a long-standing history and tradition and integration between our two economies that we have to recognize how we can together make this work. And right now, opposition, in my opinion, opposition needs to be at the table. We've put that offer out. It stands stale. Stakeholders need to be at the table. And right now, I've made conscious efforts to the government to have conversations. I've made conscious efforts to be in Ottawa and in Washington, speaking with stakeholders and industry leaders. And right now, if I can look into the cracked and cloudy crystal ball, we have to figure out and help stakeholders figure out how we're going to navigate in this path moving forward, because this isn't going to finish or end anytime soon.
But shouldn't there just be one voice for Canada at this point? Mark Carney ran during the election campaign. He won. We know in the negotiating room, it's Kirsten Hillman, who's the Canadian ambassador to the U.S. It's Dominic LeBlanc. We do know some of what's gone on back and forth through the announcement. So when you say we don't know what the concessions are, we kind of know what's already been put on the table. Canada agreeing to spend more than $1 billion on border security. Canada increasing military spending in order to meet those NATO targets. Canada agreeing to drop the DST. Do you agree with those moves so far?
The moves are talk. I would encourage Prime Minister Carney to meet the ambition of his words. And right now, there's a lot of announcements and a lot of conversations, but no real action is being made. Businesses and industries and families are feeling the hit across the board. So I think there's many pieces at play here, like even with regards to we're not knowing. There's so many unanswered questions. So I think that what I would encourage Prime Minister Carney to do is sit with the opposition, have that conversation respectfully, sit with stakeholders, and have us help everyone be that Team Canada that you referred to, and be the team, that one Canadian voice. We can do that. We can do that and respectfully move the needle on this.
But has he not done that, meeting with Indigenous stakeholders today? He's met with industry leaders. He's been consulting with the premiers. Has that not been happening? Are you just saying that you specifically would like to be included in the consultation process and you feel it's unfair that you've been left out?
I think it's imperative that we're at the negotiating table. Full stop.
So you think a Conservative MP should be at the negotiating table in the room with Kirsten Hillman and Dom LeBlanc?
It certainly would help.
Okay, we'll leave the conversation there. Thank you very much for your time today. That is the Conservative critic for Canada-U.S. trade. The Conservatives unveiled their plan to strengthen Canada amidst trade tensions with the Trump administration and criticized how the Prime Minister has handled negotiations so far.
Mark Carney promised that he would handle Donald Trump. That's a quote. He said that he would negotiate a win with Donald Trump. Those promises were not kept. The tariffs have actually doubled since Mark Carney became Prime Minister. A Conservative government would have acted more quickly to protect the sovereignty of our country. Under the Liberal government, that sovereignty has been eroded by policies that block our development, tax our people, and make us uncompetitive.
The Conservative plan aims to repeal what the Conservatives call growth-blocking laws like Bill C-69 and Bill C-48, eliminate the industrial carbon tax, and calls for the federal government to begin work on 2 major pipelines, an LNG project, and a road to the Ring of Fire, all by March 14th, the one-year anniversary of Prime Minister Mark Carney taking office. Poilievre says the government needs leadership to push these projects forward.
You're going to need national leadership, and yeah, that means that some people are going to protest, maybe chain themselves to a tree, but we have to push through that if we're ever going to get anything done.
All right, let's chat about it with the Power Panel. Michelle Cadario was Deputy Chief of Staff to former Prime Minister Paul Martin. James Moore is a former Conservative Cabinet Minister. And Shachi Kurl is President of the Angus Reid Institute. James, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of today's announcement from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and the timing of this?
I think Pierre had the best day he's had since the election night. He's the cowboy hat's off, the stampede's over. He looked prime ministerial, and he frankly repackaged a lot of the stuff that he talked about in the election campaign. But he did so in a way that basically sent a message that he understood the message of the voters on election night, which was the big project, the mission for all Canadians, is to protect Canada and to make sure that Canada can absorb the shocks and the reverberations from the Trump tariffs and the Trump trade dynamic for years to come. So he took a lot of what he said during the campaign, but he reframed it in a way that made him send a signal to Canadians that he understands what the mission is for Canada today and what it's likely to be for the next 5 years at least, which is making sure that Canada can take full access of global markets, market access, and get our resources out of the ground and into the hands of those who would reward us properly for our resources.
Michelle, I want to put the same question to you. What do you make of today's announcement, and will it put pressure on the Carney government to sort of try to move faster?
Well, listen, the Carney government's only been in for 100 days. And I think that, if anything, they have been working at record speed. They brought in C5, got it across the line with the help of the Conservatives. I've got to give them credit for that, to actually open up all of these opportunities to build. Now, Pierre Poilievre can talk about these projects, but there's actually no proponents coming forward in terms of the pipelines. And until they do, it's pretty hard to kind of shepherd them across the line, as he would say. But what I've got to give him, he's got some chutzpah. He's back. He hasn't changed, I must say. He had a little bit, maybe slightly less of a chippy tone, but still kind of getting those digs. And really, he's just bringing out the same old recording of repeal this and repeal that, which I'm not sure actually strikes any chord with Canadians whatsoever. I think that Mark Carney has us on a path to build. I hope that the Conservative Party continues to support the governing Liberals in terms of making sure that we can get things across the line. But I guess he also has a by-election coming up in a few days, so wanted to get some attention again.
Shachi, what do we know about how Canadians are feeling about, a push to get things done quickly in light of all of this uncertainty from the tariffs?
Well, it's not just Liberal voters, but it's Conservative voters who are waving a big green flag at the Carney government saying, yes, please get these things done. These are the things that we would like, please and thank you. It's not unanimous, but it's a strong majority of the country. And again, it reflects not just majorities among the base that voted for Carney and his government in the spring, but also those in terms of those policy alignments, in terms of oil and gas projects, big national projects, in terms of taking our stuff out of the ground and getting it to market that isn't the United States. Yeah, there is a significant amount of alignment across the country on that front. So, today is interesting because it's less about what Pierre Poilievre says and more about what Mark Carney can do and what he can deliver. And so at some point, Canadians are actually going to become from Missouri. What do I mean by that? It's the old show me state pun, right? They're going to want to see some results. And so if Pierre Poilievre is now starting to frame himself as trying to lay the groundwork as to, yes, all of these are great ideas, but actually, can you deliver? Can you get these things past the finish line? Do you have what it takes to do that? It may be something that resonates as Canadians become more concerned, more restive over the course of action that Ottawa's been taking as yet without a deal. But I have to tell you, from a public opinion standpoint, Canadians are pretty firmly with the Carney government, even if they don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in Carney to get a deal done. They're prepared to give this some time, and they're prepared to say, look, a lot of this has less to do with Carney and more to do with concerns over what happens with this government's ability to actually deliver on the deals that it claims it's going to deliver on.
James, one thing that came up in our interview earlier in the program with Shelby Kramp-Neuman, she was criticizing how Mark Carney has dealt with Donald Trump. But one thing she says she wants to see is that someone from the Conservative Party, an MP, should be joining Kirsten Hillman and Dom LeBlanc in the negotiating room. What do you make of that?
Sure. Just any random conservative, or do they have somebody who has a particular perspective?
I asked for specifics and I didn't quite get one, but I just thought it was, I had not heard that one before, so I want to ask you as a former Conservative cabinet minister what you think of that idea, including an MP or an opposition MP in those negotiations.
Yeah, look, I think there was virtue in the negotiation of the Kuzma agreement under Prime Minister Trudeau, that there was an NAFTA council that had former New Democrats, Brian Topp, who run for leader. I was in the room as well with Ron Ambrose. I think there was a good idea to sort of departisanize the process, so there was a sense of authenticity and sort of pan-Canadian, all hands on deck approach to all of this. I don't get any sense that Prime Minister Trudeau is treating any of what's in front of him as anything like a partisan exercise. I think he genuinely understands that this is a critical mission for Canada to protect Canadian industries, exploit and get access to global markets, bind Canada together, and to challenge the Americans to recognize the agreement that Donald Trump negotiated and signed. And I don't get any sense in his rhetoric or his approach that he's approaching this in a partisan way. And frankly, I think if Pierre Poilievre or Michael Chong or others, offered, constructive criticism and an opportunity to engage and to be part of, debriefings and came forward in good faith, I don't imagine the government would push them away. Jean Charest, for example, has been included in the process that was inherited by Prime Minister Carney from Prime Minister Trudeau. So he's sort of in the room as part of the advisory council. I've had conversations with people in the government as well. So I think there's a good faith effort, and I think more of that would be good to sustain the momentum. Of course, we have Conservative premiers Scott Moe, Doug Ford, Tim Houston, Danielle Smith has been helpful, and I think more of that is good. This is a Canadian moment. It's not a blue team or red team moment.
Michelle, with that in mind, and keeping in mind what Shachi also said to us about Canadians being willing to give the government, at least in this moment, some time, how much pressure is building on the Carney government to sort of see if they can make any sort of progress when it comes to the Trump administration? Is there pressure they're building right now within the PMO, given how unpredictable Donald Trump is and how the goalposts are just changing all over the place, and it's not affecting just Canada?
Well, you put your finger on it. I think for sure, Prime Minister and PMO, the whole team, are under pressure. They want to absolutely come through for Canada and to get a deal. But I will say, I don't think that the Prime Minister's always said, no deal is better than a bad deal. And I think that they continue to work under that rubric. What I would say as well is, I don't think that I think Canadians understand very well who Donald Trump is. He had a deal with Japan, and then he just slaps on more tariffs. There's a whole bunch of other industries, whether it's pharmaceuticals or whatever, that he's kind of holding out there as potentially having more tariffs again. Does anyone really believe that these handshakes that he's doing with different countries are going to hold up if he decides, in the morning after his cornflakes that he would rather do something else? No. And I think that absolute chaos is understood well by Canadians. And I think that, they appreciate and probably respect a Prime Minister who's not kind of jumping through every ring that he puts out in terms of his circus or his parade. I think that Mark Carney's kind of sitting back. Certainly the team is there and negotiating as they will. But in the end, we know there's only one person who is going to declare a deal done, and that's Donald Trump. And, as much as we want all of these other negotiations to be successful, and hopefully in the detail, it actually will, in the end, it's all about, the whims of one man south of the border.
Shachi, one thing that James said earlier in our conversation is that today, Pierre Poilievre was out there. He was looking prime ministerial. It was a good day for him, a strong day for him. What do we know about how Poilievre is sort of faring heading into the final stretch of this by-election race?
I mean, I know we said this. I know we all said prior to the spring election, a lot of us said, there's no way Pierre Poilievre loses his Ottawa seat. So I'm going to say it again. There's no way he loses this by-election, long ballot or no long ballot, or any of the other shenanigans that have gone on. feel free to play this back if I'm wrong. But I think the bigger question and the bigger challenge for Pierre Poilievre on an early August day at a time when a lot of Canadians, if they are watching politics, the politics they're watching are south of the border vis-a-vis what's going on with the negotiations and less about domestic politics, is how does he start to frame himself as a leader who can actually command some airtime, get some attention, articulate things that are different than what the Carney government is doing without also at the same time, being in the same trap that any opposition leader is in when you've got a fairly popular government being given a significant amount of leeway by the electorate to say, well, criticizing for the sake of criticizing, essentially. He's also got to start thinking about the road ahead. There is a leadership review coming up. And so at some points, he's going to be communicating less to the larger electorate and more to, the party base, and more than the party base, actual party membership. So when we ask Canadians, for example, we've spent a lot of time on this panel talking about a good deal versus a bad deal. What does that look like? Well, ultimately, Canadians are going to weigh in on what that looks like. Right now, today, they're saying, look, we are prepared to accept some tariffs if it makes for the best deal possible. Now, what does that look like in terms of other industries being protected or not having to make further concessions? That's all part of the calculus. So right now, even 70% of his own base is saying we'll accept some tariffs. So that, again, speaks to where he can go in terms of his communications, in one part to stand out, in other part to save his job, and then thirdly, to actually, if he's able to do that, to start to differentiate himself and frame himself in a way that stands out. And that is a tough thing to do when you're an opposition leader in a time of crisis.
James, we've got less than a minute left. I'm going to give the final answer to you. What do you expect to see from Poilievre, not just as he continues on with his by-election battle, but, as Ottawa prepares to return this fall?
I think more of what you saw today, sort of him sending a message very clearly to Canadians that, again, he understands what the priorities are for the country, right? Which is the President of the United States and the strengthening of Canada going forward. The by-election, as was mentioned, don't take anything for granted. But look, he'll likely win the by-election. He'll reassert himself outside of Alberta onto the national scene, head into the fall session of Parliament and reassert himself. I do think there's a bit of a pivot moment here, which is maybe an ending of sort of the Canadian consensus and maybe an ending of the honeymoon for Mark Carney, in the sense of everybody sort of holding hands and kind of giving him the center stage to do kind of what he wants and approach things strategically and substantively however he wants. When question period comes back, the Prime Minister is going to be asked, are you going to put in countervailing duties? On what industries? Why? Why this industry and why not that industry? What are you going to do about supply management? What are you going to do in terms of timelines? What's going to happen with regard to our approach to Europe?
And James, I hate to jump in. I hate to jump in and interrupt, but we are running right out of time. But we will pick up this conversation next week. But thank you so much. We are running out of time. We got 10 seconds left. Michelle, James, Shachi, thank you.